manufacturing recession. And the focus of today's symposium is for us to identify our successes, our opportunities, and recommendations for a path forward. So you'll see that today's symposium is broken up into three parts. We do have an intermission included, and it's also broken up in such a way that we are really intending to have a dialogue. We are starting with what is happening at the local level, defining the impact of COVID-19 on our region, and an overview of the local implications that have been delivered and brought on thus far from what we've gotten for COVID relief, which is by and large in the CARES Act. And truly a lot of best practices have been taking place at the local level. And so we want to hear from those. Then we want to step out and we're going to have a session on our regional innovation. And we're going to hear from two thought leaders in this space and looking at the trends in the industrial Internet of Things and digital manufacturing. We remember 5 to 7 years ago when some of the projections around the future of automation and digitization were sparking profound interest in what was going to happen to the future of work, what was going to happen to our jobs and consolidation that we were going to see. Some of those trends have been adjusted, those benchmarks have been adjusted, but we also know that we have a steady drumbeat on innovation. And one of the things that I'm very focused on as your member of Congress is the research and technology potential for Southeastern Michigan vis-a-vis the rest of the United States of America. And so I serve on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee as a subcommittee chair for research and technology. And the minute when COVID-19 hit and we had to social distance and our committee hearings moved online, we continued to have those committee hearings. And in fact, we were one of the only committees in the House of Representatives still meeting in a bipartisan way, asking the question, how is innovation, how is our innovation capabilities as the United States of America impacted as a result of COVID-19? And we recognize that we're still doing the technology development. We're still having an eye on the future for electric vehicles, on autonomous vehicles. We've got an autonomous highway lane that's going to be going to come to fruition right here in Michigan. And we also recognize that our international benchmarks are just not keeping up in terms of the other countries that are spending anywhere from 4 to 8 times what the United States is on research and development. And so we want to hone in on an articulation for our research and development opportunities as a region for our overall success. And then after our intermission, we're going to have a concluding session where we're going to hear from some incredible local leaders on the resources for continued recovery. One, it's so important for me and my office to share with all of you what is available right now for coronavirus relief, for economic development, for small business growth. We know that there's been some unbelievable impacts towards our small businesses and to jobs. In Michigan alone, it sort of feels like the ping pong ball has just been bouncing around. We've gone from 8.5% unemployment in September to 5.5% in October, still waiting on our Michigan specific numbers for November. I would surmise that we have likely a little bit of an uptick, our national unemployment rate being just under 7%. And then from February to April in Michigan alone, we saw 1 million jobs lost and then some regained. And our economy is really in a unique place, as not just as a state, but also as a country. And we certainly believe and recognize our capabilities and the role that Michigan is going to continue to play, just as our automakers, from the small to mid-sized manufacturers to our large original equipment manufacturers, Ford, GM, and Chrysler, played such a role in addressing the supply chain disruptions that impacted 75% of our manufacturers, that impacted all of our consumers when our grocery stores and our stores were out of toilet paper and hand sanitizer, and our nurses and our doctors in particular were facing a personal protective equipment shortages when our hospitals were saying we're worried we're going to be on our last ventilator, and yet it was our manufacturers who stepped up to that industrial call to action. Just as within the last handful of hours, we have seen the Pfizer vaccine roll out of a place that we call Michigan. And so it really is the ingenuity and the dedication to meeting the need of the time where I believe the country, if not the world, is continuing to look at us right here in Michigan. And so with that, again, today is intended to be iterative. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your statements. We do have businesses participating today. We want to hear what you are going through. We certainly understand and recognize the unbelievable impacts, the loss of revenue, the loss of wages for hardworking Americans and Michiganders. And we also want to formulate and develop together, because coming out of today's symposium is going to be a list of recommendations for the incoming Biden administration, as well as the colleagues that are joining me in the 117th session of Congress. And so with that, Hannah, I will pass it back over to you to kick off our first and very exciting session of the day.
Thank you, Congresswoman. All right, so first up we have Dr. Xuan Liu. He's the Research Director for SEMCOG, the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments. He's been with SEMCOG for nearly 24 years and oversees data analysis, research and forecasting and demographics, socioeconomics, land use, and transportation. He's been involved in long-term socioeconomic forecasting since 1997 and has directed SEMCOG's 2035, 2040, and latest 2045 forecast. Dr. Liu received his PhD in urban and regional planning from the University of Michigan, and his research interests include land use, transportation connections, as well as urban and regional capabilities. So Dr. Liu, you can start with your presentation.
Thank you, Hannah, and Congresswoman and everybody organized this very important and timely event. Really appreciate the opportunity to share some of our work and SEMCOG. Good morning, everyone. Let me start sharing my screen. Okay. So I think my role this morning is to demonstrate some of the significant impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic and the recession with facts and data to provide some basis for the discussion. I'll make a few key points first, and I'll also share with you some interactive tools that we developed in SEMCOG so that you can always go back and get more up-to-date information from there. So first, a few summary points. As Congresswoman mentioned, this recession is very unique. It's affecting different industries and people of different occupations than we knew in the past recessions. We see signs of recovery, but it's uneven, and how the recovery will go from here will depend on how well we control the pandemic as well as fiscal policies. The impacts will be long-lasting in many areas, including but not limited to business climate, affecting business closures and new startups, labor force, how we attract and retain talent, public health, how to provide healthcare, particularly to the seniors of our aging population, housing development. Home is more important than ever, thanks to the work from home and remote learning. Infrastructure, internet, broadband is essential. It's like electricity and water now for everybody, affecting quality of life and quality of place. And all of those will have impact for equality or equity in the region when we move forward. So really, don't waste a crisis. It's time to innovate and rebuild a better region. Let's look at some of the unique and uneven impacts of this recession a little bit more. So here we have 4 charts from our high frequency data dashboard. Don't worry if you can't see the details. I'll show you how to access this interactive tool in a moment. But here we can see employment recovered about half of the total loss. However, unemployment rate is still high. US cars and truck sales bounced back to nearly the normal level, but the overall consumer sentiment remains low. In the past, we were more familiar with recessions that severely reduce production, such as auto manufacturing. But this time, the disruption to manufacturing was relatively short. The high-skilled professionals also doing relatively okay, thanks to work from home options. However, the low-skilled and low-wage service sectors have been hit really hard by the pandemic and this recession. We analyzed workers and jobs affected by those vulnerable industries. So these are the people and jobs are in high risk environment because the nature of the work involves close face-to-face interaction, either with customers or with coworkers. And yet they're not considered essential. Therefore, they're more vulnerable. They include food services and drinking places, personal services, accommodation, recreation, transportation, and so on. Region-wide, in Southeast Michigan, more than 18% of the jobs are in such industries. And about 1 in 5 workers are employed in these industries. And this chart shows the demographic characteristics of these workers. The orange bars are the vulnerable workers, whereas the blue bars are the other workers. From left to right, we can see that these workers tend to be more female. More than half, or 56% of them, are women, compared to less than half, or 45% women in other industries. They tend to be less educated, 37% without even a high school diploma, versus 26% in other workers. They're younger, 26% are between age 16 and 24, while only 10% are in the other industries. They're much more likely to be part-timers and also more likely to be minorities. So there's a serious concern that the pandemic and recession will worsen the inequality in the region. So 9 months into this pandemic, we know that the full recovery will take longer than we hoped for. And this chart shows a recent updated forecast for Michigan's payroll jobs by University of Michigan's economists, published just a couple of weeks ago. As we can see, job recovery is slowing down. And even by the end of 2022, which is the end of this chart to the right, will still be 152,000 jobs short, or 3.4% below the pre-pandemic level set in the first quarter of this year. You may use SEMCOG online data tools to keep track of a region's progress towards the full recovery. Here I'm showing our regular economic indicators on the left and our new high frequency data dashboard on the right. And to access these tools, it's simply go to SEMCAG's website, which is semcag.org, and click on data and maps. And then you can access all sorts of data there. The economic trends is right here. Click on that. You see both the economic indicators and the high frequency dashboard. For the economic indicators, which is more traditional, we have some most important socioeconomic measures, including wage and salary jobs, unemployment, GDP, per capita income. Some of the charts you can switch between annual numbers with monthly numbers, similar for unemployment. You can zoom into a time period, take a closer look. Other charts, you can actually see the components. So this one is total GDP, but if you click on that, you can see the contributions to the GDP by different industries, from construction, manufacturing is the biggest one, retail, so on and so forth. Also have poverty rates, taxable value, crime rate, housing starts and vacancy rates, and education attainment, total population. Here, if you click on that chart, see the components population change, including declining immigration, declining birth, increasing death, and the unfortunate negative out-migration domestically. Also have pavement conditions and bridge conditions there as well. So that's the more traditional economic indicator. Things are changing rapidly, and there are more non-traditional and near real-time data available now. So that's why we developed the other one, which is called the high-frequency economic dashboard. Here, data organized into 4 categories. In addition to the health and COVID tracking, we have business climate, labor market, and also quality of place. So for business climate, we have job by industry, new industry startups, small business pulse survey data, consumer sentiment index, US vehicle sales, and real personal expenditures. For each indicator here, you can expand them to get a clearer picture. For example, let's just quickly expand the small business future needs in the region chart. These are data from the Census Bureau's Small Business Pulse Survey. They started in August. It's bi-weekly, really up-to-date information. They ask small businesses what you need in the future. And the response, including, this is just from a week ago or 2 weeks ago, they said increasing marketing and sales, 35% said that. Identify and hire new employees, 28%. Obtain financial assistance or additional capital, 24%. Identify new supply chain options, 13%, which is higher than normal. Develop online sales and websites, 13%. Learn how to better provide for safety of customers and employees, 12%. And unfortunately, 7% of them said they need to permanently close their business, which is the highest point at this time since the service started in August. The last tab, well, actually, I'm almost down here. The labor market tab. There you get labor force change, unemployment rate, initial and continued unemployment, and average hours and earnings, and so on and so forth. And the last tab is the quality of place, where we have housing starts, home price, transportation, mobility data, such as trips by purpose and destination, also mental health indicators during the pandemic. So this is really a quick overview of just a couple of examples of data we have and tools we have. With that, I'll stop right there, stop sharing, and turn it back to Hannah. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Liu. All right, so up next we have Dan Gilmartin. He's the Executive Director and CEO of the Michigan Municipal League. He's recognized as a national leader in the fields of urban revitalization, placemaking, local government reform, and transportation policy. He's testified before U.S. Congress Senate Committee on behalf of local governments nationwide regarding state and local transportation and infrastructure needs. He has authored numerous opinion columns that have appeared in statewide publications and is a contributing author to several books about the economics of community building. So, Dan, if you're ready, we'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Ann. I appreciate that very much. And thanks to the Congresswoman for her leadership and for having this forum. It's been great to work with you, Congresswoman Stevens, in your short time in Washington. And we look forward to continuing that positive relationship as we move forward. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the outcomes of what's been going on in DC and how it's been affecting local units of government by extension, the business interests here in Southeast Michigan. It's very important now in 2020. It's becoming more important every day, I think, that we've got to have great places for people to live and to work if we're going to be a strong economic contributor here in the U.S. When we see, I know in a state like Michigan where we have this long industrial history that I like to think if we go back to say 1950, that you as a local leader had to choose between sort of having a high quality of life or having a good business interest in your community. So if you were citing a big plant, for example, it was probably dingy, it tore up all the roads, there was some pollution, everything else, but they employed everybody in the community and they paid for jobs and they built schools and everything else with their tax dollars. So that was sort of how Michigan was born, if you will, in this industrial revolution that we're just, I don't know if we're coming out of it, if we're moving to a new phase. I think we're moving to a new phase, but nowadays it's really one and the same. You build great places that people want to be, and that in and of itself becomes a positive business environment. We see that as we go out, we study all the other states and regions and communities around the country and really around the world. We've got to basically combine those two things together. And for those of you that may be business owners who tried to attract people to come work at your business or try to retain good workers and good leaders within your field, you know that quality of life and what we're able to provide here from a community standpoint is first and foremost in their mind. So I think when we talk about the strength of municipal services, the strength of having a great community, a historic downtown, a good housing stock, whatever it might be, that really becomes job one, really, when we talk about trying to make Michigan more competitive from a business standpoint. So I'm going to start right now by just talking about one program that just opened today. If you are or happen to know anybody who is a small business person in the restaurant field, the catering field, even a little bit of retail that was impacted directly by the recent shutdown that we still find ourselves in, shutdown's the wrong word, but the new rules that were issued by the state of Michigan, there is money available for those folks, came from Congress. Thank you very much, Congresswoman Stevens. This is money that sort of comes from Congress through the state and is now being let out to businesses. It's the Pure Michigan Small Business Relief Initiative. You can find out information about that at michiganbusiness.org, which is through the MEDC, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. If you go there and you look underneath their COVID-19 relief area, you'll be able to see that you can that business owners in those fields can apply for that right now. So that actually opened this morning at 9 a.m. There's only about $3.5 million available for Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb counties. There will be $15,000 grants going out to those businesses that actually qualify for that. So if you are one of those businesses or know one of those businesses in that area, there's more information there about who they are. They can get to that portal today and get out there and do that, because it's going to be at a first come, first served basis. But it's really sort of leads to what I want to talk about a little bit more in depth, and that is how we're responding and how basically the governmental structures between the federal government and the state government and the local governments are working well together or not working well together to try to stem the tide here of this pandemic, and not just from a public health standpoint, which is vitally important, but how we keep our economies going as well, which is really the focus of the seminar. So the CARES Act, which is much talked about, that was passed by Congress and signed by the president last year. No, I'm sorry, earlier this year. I'm moving ahead a little bit. It seems, hey, it's COVID. It feels like 20 years ago. Where money came from, money came to Michigan. About $3 billion went to the state of Michigan, which was great. It was great for the state government, and basically the state government was able to move forward on October 1st of this year with a balanced budget. They were able to backfill some of the costs that they have. Much of that money really hasn't made its way down to the local level. So when you start talking about water systems that are outdated, and again, think pre-COVID. I mean, we had issues from a financial standpoint in Michigan in terms of how we fund local governments pre-COVID. Obviously, the roads were a big issue in the last election. That's what everybody was talking about. They have not been fixed, in case anybody hasn't noticed that. We probably notice them less because we're driving less, but you can still hear the feelings, you feel the feelings in your teeth rotting or jumping around in your mouth as you drive down mile roads in Metro Detroit or anywhere else in the state. So we've got to just do something with that. Obviously, the lead pipe issue is a very important one in terms of how we deal with some of those issues, how we fund public safety, how we fund basic services, and then getting to the point where I talked about earlier is going beyond that to make sure our places are livable, are walkable, have cultural opportunities, those types of things. Because if you don't have that kind of stuff, you're not going to be competitive for a talented workforce moving forward. So all this stuff is still there. And what COVID has done from a municipal standpoint has not impacted cities like the way it's impacted, say, a restaurant business right away. So if you're a restaurant business in February of 2020 and your monthly receipts were, I'm making this up, $100,000, in March or in April, they may have gone down to either nothing or to $5,000 or $10,000. So you see that sort of just drop right off the planet. That's not been the case with local government. What we're more concerned about in terms of how we fund local governments and how we fund these services is it's more of a long tail. So when you start talking about property tax, for example, that hasn't changed as we see it. But if we are headed towards a recession, if there is some blowback from COVID, and we start to see these things play themselves out over the next year or two or three, that's where you start to see a real downfall in terms of how we fund units and obviously how we fund the services that we're all looking for. And some of the other aspects in terms of how that comes in is much more sort of long tail than it is immediate, where it's like, oh my gosh, we've got to shut our doors. We don't find local units in that predicament right now. There have been some that have been very much affected. City of Detroit, when they had some big COVID issues, certainly county health departments and other folks. But for the most part, locals have stemmed that. It's much more of an issue of longer ongoing problems and ongoing concerns. And I know right now they're debating a series of bills in Congress, in the House, and it's talked about more of something in the concept of, or in the range of $2 billion. The Senate's around 2 trillion. The Senate's around 900 billion. B's and T's always confuse me because it's more money than I can get my arms around. But and in that case, if we pass those bills, it'll really go towards helping out local units in terms of stemming the tide for what's going on right now. But we've still got that longer term issue that we've got to deal with. The doctor talked earlier about something like broadband, extremely important from a business standpoint. We've got to do a much better job with that, sort of the new infrastructure as well as the old school type of infrastructure we think about in terms of roads and waters and sewers and everything else. So those are the types of issues that were an issue going into COVID. There's certainly an issue now, and I think they're even more difficult to deal with long-term coming out of that, which is why I'm very hopeful that we'll have really a better relationship and with or a better partnership between local, state, and federal government moving forward, because that's paramount to what we're doing here. Again, the doctor talked about R&D and the amount of money going into things of that nature. That's really something the federal government could take on. You can't do that at the local level, but we can do our job at the local level, trying to make the community great, while federal government tackles some of the bigger issues higher up in the tree, if you will, and state government continues to do its job as well. So we're really looking forward to that improved relationship where we can tackle this stuff as a community, and obviously make our communities and our region and this congressional district better places to live and better places to work in. So with that, I'll kick it back to Hannah and say thank you very much for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us, Dan and Dr. Liu. We're going to head into our Q&A session right now. So if you do have a question, use the raise your hand feature at the bottom of the screen, and we'll try and find you and call on you.
Great, and thank you both so much. Dr. Liu, very grateful for all the data you shared and the resources that people can access through your website. And Dan, thank you for covering just sort of the list of what's working right now, and also some things that we really need to take into consideration. I work very closely with our municipal leaders here in the district. It's been, frankly, one of the best things that we set up to address the short, midterm, and long-term needs of this pandemic, which is just a regular functional dialogue between my office and our municipal offices. And that's the number one thing we hear, is that the $3 billion that came to the state of Michigan, it slowly, just like, if not at all, come to our local government. And, when you look at our district, we've got, very well-run cities with healthy budgets, and we're doing everything right before this hit. And then the question just becomes, well, where's our fair share of resources? And also, how do we, kind of put our hands up for that flexible funding and those funding considerations? And I know that we have here today, we sent out the invite for today's session far and wide. And so we do have a handful of national leaders, thought leaders, and academics and publishers. And I believe I saw that we have Bruce Katz on with us today, who has been one of the just leading minds over the last couple of decades on the future of cities and metropolitan economic development growth strategies. Bruce recently, in his position at Drexel, just put out a list of recommendations for metropolitan areas, particularly to think about how to work with the federal government. And I know, as someone who previously worked at the Economic Development Administration, which is a federal grants making agency for localities, that this is something we need to think about, and we need to be smart about. And we also want to use today's platform and the relationship that all of us are forging coming out of today's symposium to articulate those needs coming from our region, and also exercise that relationship with the federal government. And I'm talking about all our agencies, not just my office. So Bruce, if you don't mind, I'd love to just bring you into this conversation, and particular any reactions that you have and things that you're maybe working on that you might want to share as related to what you've heard so far today.
Well, thanks for having me, Congresswoman, and really kudos for pulling this all together. And it is absolutely wonderful to follow Dan. I mean, the Michigan Municipal League is like best in class example across the entire country of state leagues of municipalities. I would just say a few things. First, your opening was spot on. Southeast Michigan is a globally significant node and a vanguard of innovation around clean energy, the mobility revolution, ag tech, fintech, and beyond. And as we move out of this crisis, there is enormous potential to take what is a very significant and distinctive ecosystem of advanced research, advanced companies, startups, scale-ups, community colleges because of the talent, and really cohere this in a way that you grow quality jobs for a large segment of your population. I will say that the piece I put out last week is as much about the what the federal government does. I mean, in the near term, we've got to basically stabilize and help restart small businesses. We have to focus on the places where they tend to be concentrated, commercial corridors, business districts, main streets. But as we move forward and we invest in innovation, infrastructure, and human capital, the key here is how do you cohere the vertical way in which the federal government operates? A lot of programs, a lot of products, a lot of agencies, a lot of committees, and the way in which cities and metros operate, which is more as ecosystem, as networks. Small business, it's that mix of the feds, eds, meds, and corps providing customers, relationships with vendors, capital access, these business districts. Innovation, as I said before, are really ecosystems. So the federal government is vertical. Cities and metros are horizontal. And the more we almost reverse engineer federal policy to reflect the way cities and metros actually operate, more direct funding to locality, local governments for sure, building on Dan's comments, but also support for these networks, and understanding that a successful federal program is only as successful as how robust, how capable, and how resourced these networks are at the local level. So I'm really happy to be with you today. I think what you're doing should be repeated in congressional districts all over the country, frankly, and look forward to working with you and your staff and really this network of Southeast Michigan on the path going forward.
Excellent. Thanks, Bruce. Thanks for being here.
We do have another question from Glenn Stevens. What are your thoughts on longer-term population issues of Michigan, aging workforce, immigration issues in recent years, and low birth rates? And Dan or Dr. Lee, you can answer that.
I'll jump in. Thank you. That's a great question. As we know, we are not a fast-growing region compared to the rest of the nation. So the real concerns about the labor force in the future. The labor force participation is also a concern. We need to have more people get into the labor force, either by training, more education, have them more prepared for the future economy. Both Dan and Bruce mentioned the future of the new economy, and we need people educated for those industries. For population itself, really, there are four components of that: births, deaths, migration. Migration includes international and domestic migration. We all know that birth rate is going down and death rate is actually going up because of aging population. And unfortunately, we have a domestic out migration for decades, more people living in the region than coming in. More recently, the international migration into the region is also declining. In 2016, we had 18,000 people moving into the region that year. 4 years later, last year, we had 8,000. It's a 54% decline in immigration to the region. So that doesn't help, and the pandemic doesn't help our future economic growth or population growth. So we need to build a better region, as both Dan and Bruce said, have a better place to attract more people to come to this region.
I wholeheartedly concur with that. And I think it's really important to understand that in Michigan, over the last several decades, we've been getting older and we've been getting poorer. And we've got to reverse those trends if we're going to be competitive. If you go back again pre-COVID, and I'll go back to the roads, which was the big issue in the last gubernatorial election and still remains out there, especially once we start to move out of the crisis management we've been in for so many months. We got to go back to things like roads and sewers and everything else. But in Michigan in 1980, we had between 9.5 and 10 million people in the state. And we were a top third per capita income in the country when we related the state to other states around the country. Today, we have between 9.5 and 10 billion people in the state, and we're a bottom third per capita income state. And during that time, during that 40-year period, we built literally thousands of miles of new roads. And we basically moved our population around. We haven't added to it, but we've moved people from core communities to suburbs, from suburbs to exurbs, and in some cases from exurbs even out into the middle of nowhere. So we have more roads today. They cost more. we have the same amount of people and we're relatively poorer than we were 40 years ago. The reason we can't keep up with this is just simple mathematics. It's not anything different. It's not a conspiracy. It's not a problem at the state or the local or the federal level. It's we've got to become, we've got to improve our demographics and move forward about retaining people here, about drawing people here, about drawing businesses. And certainly the types of people we want to bring here are those that can really contribute to what we're all doing. I agree completely with what Bruce said earlier. Southeast Michigan in particular, but Michigan in general, is a hub and a very important one of innovation, industrial activity, you name it. And we've got that in our DNA. We've got that in who we are. We've just got to figure out a way to really push that forward and supersize it as we move into the 2020s here, because we've got to change those demographics if we're going to be positive. And I look forward to trying to do that with all of you.
Thank you both.
I'll be Dan and Dr. Lowe.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one more quick question. So we got one from Lori Boyce. Given the reduced jobs and slowed hiring, she's worried that people graduating from college this year will be forever harmed as they're not going through a normal hiring process. What are your thoughts on how to address that? Either one of you can take it.
Yeah, I'll jump. I think, you know, again, there's a lot of those longer term trends. You talk about the hiring process. I have two sons, one just entered high school, one who just entered middle school, and I'm concerned about the social process with kids of that age as well. I mean, if for those of us who are adults, this is a bad year. It's one of 25 or 45 or 65 that we've lived, or however old we are. But if you're 9, 10, 11 years old, you've spent 10% of your life in quarantine. And that's really sort of a bizarre thing. And we're still not out of it yet, obviously. So I do think there are a lot of those, again, the long tail effects of what's going on right now with COVID. When you get out of the crisis and we got to look back on this and figure out how we get this thing moving again and how we come out of this in a really impactful way. And again, it's mentioned several times, but how we innovate. I mean, this is the ultimate disruption in the force, if you will. And people only really innovate when we disrupt things. And a lot of the trends that we're seeing are things that were probably going to happen anyway, but they just happen in hyper speed. There's something I think a lot about is the K-shaped return. If you think of a graph, and people can see this, it's sort of the return on what's going on is a K-shape. It looks like this a little bit. That's really important how I'm doing that. But some businesses have figured it out and they're doing this. Some businesses haven't and they're going right to the ground. There's very few people that are just sort of hanging in there. So, and it's amazing. You can drive by a strip mall and 3 or 4 of the businesses in it have figured it out. They're doing great. 3 or 4 of them have locked up and you're never going to see them again. So that was probably going to happen anyway, but it's just happening at hyper speed right now. So I don't have the answer to those things, but I do think there's a lot of social and economic issues that are going to have a longer term effect beyond just getting past the virus itself. And it's something, again, we'll need local, state, and federal government working together on.
I agree with Dan. If I can just add a small thing quickly, innovation for job matching with workers, with new graduates, it's also needed. Just like right now, we can do this virtually. We don't have to wait for the pandemic to be over. And the pandemic is really changing the way people work, people interact, working from home. You can work anywhere for any companies in different places. So that also changed the way we attract people, we attract talents. We used to chase jobs, getting more people invest here. Now, I think we're more used to chasing people. We can attract people, live here, they can work for any companies in the world. So I think the technology provide additional opportunities for matching people and jobs.
Yes, thank you both. Well, we appreciate your insight. Thank you so much for joining us for this first session, Dan and Dr. Liu. We appreciate it. We're going to head to our next session.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. All right, so next we have Cynthia Hutchinson and Horace Tiggs. We're going to get them teed up. I'm going to introduce Cynthia really quick. Cynthia Hutchinson is the Vice President of Automation Alley, directing sales, marketing, program development, and operations for the association's 1,100 technology, manufacturing, and business members. She also leads Automation Alley's government affairs efforts and plays a key role in maximizing Automation Alley's reach nationally and globally. She serves as Automation Alley's liaison to the World Economic Forum and promotes its role as the World Economic Forum's first North American advanced manufacturing hub. And I see we got Cynthia on.
Good morning. Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too.
Go
ahead. You can start.
I was going to say, I want to thank everybody. Thank you all for having me, and special thanks to U.S. Congresswoman Haley Stevens for trusting me to share messages with you all today. I am here representing Automation Alley, and we are Michigan's Industry 4.0 Knowledge Center. And the last speakers have been talking about things that are really near and dear to us. First of all, this issue that we saw, and I keep using the term laid bare, but laid bare by COVID, was already fostering. We already knew as a manufacturing zone, we had to address rapid upskilling of our workforce, rapid acceptance of technology, and make these changes to stay competitive in the advanced manufacturing arena. Automation Alley did a really interesting thing. We received $12 million from Oakland and Macomb counties through the CARES grant. Thank you, Congresswoman Stevens and the entire Congress for the CARES grant, which really helped people like us. We use that money, and I am really proud to say I work with a leadership team that developed something very innovative. Instead of just helping people stay stable, we use that money to start a really exciting new program. It is called Project Diamond. I gotta say it to you like reading it, because I can never remember the acronym. I didn't create it. Distributed, Independent, Agile, Manufacturing on Demand. And the goal of this is to jumpstart digital transformation for this entire region by creating the largest network of blockchain-enabled 3D printers. This will go far towards enabling our community and our region and our state to stay connected and become, once again, the center of manufacturing that we all believe we always have been. So we don't like to lose that momentum. Through this program, we'll connect 350 total manufacturers in those two counties on the Diamond Network, and it will accelerate their transformation using the PPE manufacturing response and strengthen supply chains. So let me tell you what the genesis of this. The CARES project, CARES grant, and I'm not always in the grant world, so if I misstate something, I hope somebody catches me on it. But the CARES grant was designed to prove that we can make PPE, so that never again, since those two counties allocated resources to us, never again should Oakland and Macomb County be without something that they need in a PPE setting, because they provided this grant, which we're funding to manufacturers. The important thing is, if you're really a manufacturer in automotive or in aerospace or in defense, and you want to continue to manufacture in that, you merely have to prove that you can produce PPE and agree to be on call should we need PPE. Quite frankly, I do not believe that we will ever again have a shortage of these. I think that we've worked this out, and somehow somebody's going to take care of the little blue mask forever. And similarly, a lot of the other things that we made for this go round of a catastrophe and a catastrophic need. However, there will always be needs that we want to protect as a region, a state, and a nation. So whether our next crisis is similar PPE, different PPE, the bigger issue was, how do we make sure we have an agile supply chain that is truly resilient and ready to pivot on a moment's notice? So through this network, we'll all be certifying businesses as essential. That means that's the difference between a business going into growing their business and going out of business. The significance of it also lies on the blockchain. It just cannot be overemphasized. By having 350 printers connected through a secured technology like blockchain, we become a leader on the world stage, democratizing Industry 4.0 applications and accessibility for even our smallest manufacturers. We have very small companies. We've got companies with 4 employees on the network, as well as companies with 200. The opportunity exists to start out validating that we can make PPE, and then turn around and get for example, what we just went through with COVID. One of our OEMs or tier ones has a a fractured supply chain because of a tsunami. There's a tsunami in India. This is predicted. No, there's a tsunami in India. There's a fractured supply chain, and now we've got an OEM or tier one that's going to shut down their factory because they're missing a part. They can come to us, and through the blockchain, we can distribute that purchase order that they've missed and get it sent out immediately to a network of 350 printers. All of the printers get paid for the right amount that they pick off the line. So if a printer comes on board, and if a small business comes on board and said, out of that order of 100,000, Automation Alley, I can only make 2,000. They make 2,000, they get paid their proportion of it. If somebody else says, I can make 40,000, they make 40,000. It's really going to be a flexible, fluid, agile network. And I think it could change Michigan forever. I'm obviously very excited about it because I do think this is a transformational thing. And I'm really proud to work here at this time because when we were selected by the World Economic Forum to be the advanced manufacturing hub for North America, we were very proud. But we've had to grow into that reality of, are we doing everything the best we possibly can? And I think this democratization project displays really unique initiative and something we haven't seen anywhere else. You know, the manufacturing industry has seen terrific global supply chain impact, and it will continue to see it. I do think we're going to change forever what our supply chains look like. I see a regionalization of some supply chains where more and more are going to come back into something within a certain geographic range of the source and the end product. But most importantly, we have this opportunity for our manufacturers here in Michigan, both large and small, to respond by just retooling their factories and pivoting to lead in PPE production and subsequently in flexible, resilient opportunity. You know, through our arsenal of innovation and led by GM and Ford Motor, hundreds of companies were rising to the occasion. This is a chance for the small businesses to play a role in that as well. There are a finite number of these huge businesses, and we love them and we appreciate them and we like working with them, but we really exist along with, I know my colleague from MMTC is on here, along with MMTC, we exist supported by the MEDC, supported by federal funds to make sure that our small businesses in Michigan grow. And we take that very seriously. So we're excited about this opportunity. Many manufacturers do understand the importance of digital transformation, but just had not made it a priority. I think Dan alluded to that. We've known we need to do more. They know they need to do more. Quite frankly, for all the manufacturers on this call, love our manufacturers, but it's really difficult for a manufacturer to leave his or her plant and come to Automation Alley or come and learn something. It just isn't how it's done so often because there's such an ongoing demand for their product. And we all know that when times are good, people are churning out product. They're moving. When things slow down, they don't have any money. So we've always been stuck in this. This is this one moment in time where everything stopped for everybody at the same time. And now we have to take advantage of it. So we know that the pandemic really forced some of this digital transformation, but we don't want to stop there. This is our ability to be resilient and agile. And this is going to continue to show us how we can lead once again through Project Diamond and be a national and global leader in manufacturing. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Cynthia. Now, up next, we have Horace Tiggs. He is from Accenture Detroit Innovation Hub. He is the managing director. And during his 20-year career, Horace has focused on introducing emerging technology, innovation, and sustained delivery to drive client business and technology objectives across many industries, including chemicals, utilities, energy, hospitality, and automotive. So without further ado, here's Horace.
All righty. Well, thank you for that warm introduction, Hannah, and thank you, Congresswoman Stevens. Good to see you. You know, virtually. One of these days we'll do it again in person, but good to see you, and I appreciate the opportunity to come share a few thoughts today. So there's been a significant amount of allusion to innovation here, and as the Innovation Hub Director in Detroit, I just want to go after this a different way and really just share a few thoughts around, you know, how we process innovation and how we think about innovation and what we're seeing in the market, right? So as alluded to, you know, Cynthia, hey Cynthia, good to see you. Cynthia alluded to it, Dan and Bruce and several others alluded to it earlier, how COVID has really accelerated the need for transformation, right? And so what we're seeing is that for businesses to continue to be relevant, continue to be actually in existence, they need to drive resiliency. They need to rethink their practices. They need to think about their customers. They need to think about how they're delivering products and services and how they reinvent the workforce and invest in reinvention of that workforce. And so, taking a step back, the innovation's it's a key tag word, but the way we think about innovation at Accenture is simply just a new way of doing things that adds value, right? So it's not necessarily flash, it's not necessarily dash, but it's all about, how do I add value through the examination or refinement or introduction of some new set of tools, technology, capabilities, what have you. Another way to say it is, at Accenture, we think about it through the lens of living our purpose, which is, to deliver on the promise of technology and human ingenuity, right? So the intersect of those two things. And so successful innovation, as we've heard earlier in the day, is all about investing in technology, investing in your people, and how to integrate these two things to ensure that both your systems as well as your workforces are future-proof. And so, Dan mentioned earlier about the K-curve, right? And how some companies have figured it out and some companies haven't figured it out. And so one of the things that we've seen is that there's 5 kind of fundamental, I'll call them truths, but they're 5 fundamental things that people are looking for when they engage or re-engage with companies, right? And the companies that have figured this out are kind of on the upswing, and the companies that haven't figured it out are on the downswing a little bit. And it's these 5 things. First is trust, right? So the pandemic has really eroded confidence in a lot of institutions, a lot of businesses, a lot of places. And so companies that have really figured out how to build or rebuild trust and credibility and instill confidence in the services they provide are places that we're looking to go right now, right? So trust is piece 1. Second is about everything being virtual, right? So the pandemic has forced everything virtual, or the majority of things virtual. And so, any company that has figured out how to do something in a virtual manner or how to deliver a service in a virtual manner is at the top of the curve, right? The third is everything around health, right? So every business is a health business is one of the things that we say right now, which is concerns about people's health is forefront in their mind, right? And so anything that a company can do to reinsure our confidence in our well-being, right? They are concerned about our well-being is top of mind. Fourth is this concept that we call cocooning. And so pandemic drove us all to our home offices like I'm sitting in right now. And it's also forced us to think about pods, who we interact with, what activities we can do at home, what's the definition of a small group or a large group. And those traits and those things of those ways of thinking are going to persist, right? So eventually we will get back to the large events, but this concept of cocooning is probably going to be here to stay for a while. And so being able to operate in that is another key truth. And then the fifth thing that we're seeing is, and probably the most difficult to wrap the mind around, is this concept of authority, right? And so who we pay attention to is really being dictated, whether that's companies, whether it's organizations, whether it's leaders, who we pay attention to is really being determined by the credibility that people have shown during the pandemic. And if we identify that you have the best intentions at the forefront, then we tend to stick with you and we'll tend to trust that authority. If we feel that there's a kink in the armor, so be it, then that's where people are going to test that authority in some ways. And so the companies that have really maintained resilience in the market, we see are playing at high ends of the majority of those areas. And so to that end, what we're seeing from companies is really two big things. One around value identification. So taking those 5 truths into place and rethinking kind of who their customer is, what that customer desires, and how the existing business model that they have will need to shift to provide the service or the item or the product that customer needs. So that's piece one. The second piece, which has been alluded to multiple times in this conversation, is really all around the power of digital transformation, right? So anything that can be done to increase flexibility of operations coupled with the resilience of those operations is going to be key. And so whether that's supply chain resilience, whether it's, smart manufacturing, additive manufacturing, all of those things are going to be key. And as Bruce mentioned earlier, in his comments around federal engagement in innovation, federal engagement and the federal engagement kind of coupled with the integration with state and local engagement is the key to really driving, or is a key, to driving some of that digital transformation, because it plays an important role in spurring the change and helping industries here locally in Michigan get ahead of our global competition. The other thing, and I know I've got a few minutes to try to wrap this down and land this plane. The other thing that we're seeing is really around, as I shared earlier, workforce, right? How are we really starting to drive workforce reinvention and things of that nature? And so we're seeing two big trends. One is around what I will call growth futures, right? So are companies pivoting to be ready for more, remote capability, whether that's in remote work or whether it's in remote skilling, right? So are we investing in the right tools and infrastructure? Are we adopting a clear strategy around what that looks like and ensuring that security is top of mind in that strategy? Are we using technology in a way that it adds value? So whether that's collaboration tools, whether it's cloud tools, whether it's utilization of AI and ML to enable seamless kind of employee interfaces, it's all of these things that we're seeing on the growth future side. On the growth culture side, we're also seeing companies that are challenging and establishing the culture of their organization around focusing on what we call a digital edge. Those are the companies that are having direct top and bottom line impact. And when I say digital edge, I'm really referring to four things. Digital foundations, right? So do you have digital architectures in place to enable your employees? Digital operations, right? So are these digital technologies and the insights that come from the digital technologies in place so that you can transform the way people work? Digital leadership and culture. So top down, bottom up, and in the middle. Are we really seeing collaborative leadership behaviors that are encouraging people to knowledge share, to learn, to take risks, things of that nature? And then ultimately, and then fourth is what we call digital workforce TQ, or technology quotient. So do our workforces have the right skills, the right knowledge, and understand the value that technology provides? And so finally, just as a way of a few examples, I know what we're seeing and what we're doing at Accenture is we're partnering with local apprenticeship organizations, local workforce organizations such as Grand Circus, to try to provide and not reskill, but upskill, right? So skilling is an additive event. And so how do we continue to upskill and introduce new skills and capabilities for individuals? So I think that's one thing we're seeing. Another thing we're seeing is all around diversity, right? So diversity and innovation are coupled. And so in order to be competitive, not only do you need to be agile and transformative to drive innovation, but you also need to ensure that diverse ways of working, diverse ways of thinking, diverse experiences are being infused into those ways. And so some of the things that we've done locally are around, driving virtual showcases with small businesses and encouraging visits into our innovation center so that people can see and touch and feel how some of these transformations work. Another thing that we're doing is actually infusing our inclusive future of work initiatives throughout the diaspora to try to drive this penetration and this integration. So I will leave it there because I'm 2 minutes over, but looking forward to hopefully a robust set of questions and answers. So thank you very much.
No, you were both great, and thank you. I could listen to Horace, your team, and you and Cynthia at Automation Alley for like the bulk of the afternoon. I found that so fascinating, and the question that just kept coming up in my mind is, how are we going to pay for this, right? Because what we're seeing right now is this deep and vast need to do what we were talking about in the first session, which is support our municipalities, support our small businesses, make sure that we've, gotten through to the other side of this pandemic. My mantra the entire time has just been, no one's allowed to fail, right? I'm not in the business of picking winners and losers. But then when we start to think about the deep work of creating holistic opportunity for all, and something you touched on at the very end there, Horace, just with the diaspora and this, reckoning moment that we've also found ourselves in as a nation as it pertains to the legacy of racial injustice and diversity inclusion. And that's also very, very tied into the economic development plight. And frankly, when we start to look at IoT and digital manufacturing and, trillion-dollar industries of scale, they better be something for everybody. And yet we've seen this exacerbated wealth disparities, particularly obviously over the last, bulk of this entire century, but most acutely in this pandemic. And so again, we've got another individual here who's joined in for our symposium, Dan Berglund, who runs a technology-based economic development national group, SSTI, based out of Columbus. Some of you might be familiar with some of their conferences and offerings. I know that they've got a lot of members in and around the Midwest, but also around the country. And this is an organization I've been very honored to work with, obviously in my capacity as a member of Congress, but in my previous career doing economic development work. And I'd love to bring Dan in as well for just some reflections and commentary, particularly in this continuing work that we need to do to develop and drive our innovation economy. Just so much to chew on with what Cynthia and Horace just shared. And Dan, we'd love any reflections or comments you might have here. And nice to see you this morning.
Good to see you as well. I think the whole morning has been great. All four speakers that you've had have really hit the nail on the head in terms of the issues that we have. I guess I'd try to break things down into two broad themes. There's an issue of immediate rescue for the economy, and then there's longer term rebuilding the economy. And Representative Stevens, the point that you just made, I think is really critical, is that we do have this income disparity. We've had it for decades. And so even when we had record low unemployment, that doesn't mean that we had a good economy. So let me talk just about a couple quick things on the rescue part, and I'll echo what some of the other speakers have said. I think it's absolutely critical that we get state and local government aid out. The Federal Reserve Chairman has talked about one of the lessons learned from the Great Recession was that the slow recovery on state and local government proved to be a drag on the economy overall. State governments can't do what they need to do in order to get vaccine distribution and economic growth out with the record deficits that most states are facing. So dealing with that is critical. A new installment of PPP with clearer guidance than the first round is also critical. I'm encouraged. I just looked this morning at language from Senator Manchin's bill. That language looks pretty good and would provide the kind of flexibility that companies that Cynthia and Horace work with, small companies that need that help. And frankly, nonprofits like my own need as well. But then thinking about the longer term, I would suggest three things specifically around the innovation area. One is there needs to be a new, robust federal commitment to the support, financial support for commercialization of federally funded research. So the US is great at a research engine, great at the commitment that the federal government has made since the end of World War II in building research, but we need to get that research to the marketplace. And unfortunately, right now the system is higher ed will take care of that. Well, higher ed is more financially strapped than ever before. So the feds need to step into this. Going along with companion to PPP would be a new version of the state small business credit initiative, SSBCI, learning from the lessons from the Great Recession. And then the final point that I would make is just we've got a good program at the Department of Commerce and Regional Innovation Strategies, building that program, scaling that program to a much higher level would be helpful in building the long-term economy we need as well. Thanks so much for including me.
Yeah, thanks. I'll tell you, I inquired with the Treasury Department in the very early days of this pandemic, Dan, about the state of SSBCI. And as we all know, the program is largely dormant and expired, and reviving it, I completely agree with. And we do need to think about the next phase. Certainly, we saw PPP come down in several rounds. One, the fatal flaw of having PPP come down as like pinata breaking open and the banks flocking to the resources, no technical assistance being provided, right? No technical assistance. And it's a great reminder about these entities that exist outside of our federal government, almost in lockstep, entities such as yourself, frankly, that do provide that technical assistance, and entities like Automation Alley and our friends at Accenture. And I'll just say, Automation Alley is more of a public-private partnership here out of our first two speakers. And yet, you're doing the long-term work around developing and honing our innovation economy, our innovation workforce. And we can't forget that, yes, we've got a big hole to fill in almost what feels like an endless need to support the impacted businesses, the impacted workforce. We will get there, but we can't forget, some of the work that we're doing. Of course, I'm very familiar with the Grand Circus program through our relationship. And it's a success that keeps on giving back to our community, because it's not just where we're doing great things, which is at the secondary and post-secondary level, but we've got to find the existing workforce and continue to train and provide those on-ramps to opportunity. So this is just such a great springboard, and I'm going to stop here, Hannah, because I know you probably have some questions teed up.
Yeah, we have
but I'm digging this. I'm digging it. So thank you.
So we have a question from Ellen Dorshow Gordon. We're going to unmute her, and then you can ask your question, Ellen.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, as the Congresswoman knows, I'm a retired public health epidemiologist, and I did work at the Oakland County Health Department for several years. And I'm not really going to state this as questions, but as issues that I think we need to address. Number one is that public health is not healthcare. And the best way to put it is, when I worked in public health, the entire community was my patient. So that could have been one neighborhood, the city, or the entirety of Oakland County when I was there. And one of the issues that we're facing in public health is trust. and that is trust in vaccines, and that is trust in contact tracing. And in Oakland County, I was told that 30% of the people who have been notified for contact tracing have not wanted to talk to them because they didn't trust the system. And contact tracing has been used for all outbreaks, and even when we had reports of single infectious diseases. And that is one of the key ways that we would have been able to help address the pandemic, by knowing who might have been exposed and by educating them in how to protect themselves. So that would give us the opportunity to have reinforced what we've been trying to get people to do, wear masks, social distancing, etc. The other one, and I really want to thank Cynthia Hutchinson for the work that they're doing with PPE, but there is still a tremendous PPE shortage throughout the United States. I have friends who are working in hospitals in different parts of the country who are being forced to reuse their PPE. I have a friend who's a nurse who is a cancer survivor, and she's in Florida, and I worry about her. And I have friends in hospitals here who are still telling me about these issues. So my question to you, and I think that's really something that needs to be taken back to the industries that are really doing a good job trying to meet our needs, and also in terms of Congress and the science that is behind public health. We need to start having people believe in science again. So thank you.
Thanks for your comments, Ellen.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else have any questions? So if you have a question, raise your hand and we'll call on you, or you can message us in the chat feature.
I'll just step in to say, and have Ellen reach out to me directly for PPE shortage, because certainly Michigan wants to supply for Michigan, but if you know of people with a shortage elsewhere, we don't have a shortage here, I think we ought to be able to work that without a conflict.
Yeah, some of that matchmaking, Cynthia, which I know you've been at the, just the helm of, has been so critical. And I remember in the early days, our office just created a Google Doc form for the companies who we were reaching out to, partly because, I have, through my Manufacturing Monday program, which is something I've participated in with you and with Horace and, dozens and dozens of other enterprises throughout the district, to kind of keep our finger on the pulse of these innovation needs. But we created the form of who has the specs and who doesn't for the PPE considerations. And, when you see that, that supply chain disruption, occur and occur in such a unbelievable way when we've, got these open source platforms, we've got, supposedly, the whole weight of the federal government behind it. We also see the opportunity there too. So, and Ellen brings up a great point. It's not totally over. I mean, we're talking to providers, continuing to reach out to all of our nursing homes in the district in terms of what's shaking out here. And part of what we all have to remember with coronavirus is when we first started to hear about this, right, at the very beginning of 2020, rather, hit at the very end of 2019, but we really didn't enter the lexicon until the very beginning of this year, is novel. This is new. It's a new virus. And so the first quarter or two of this was just learning about what this virus was, what the spread was, really requiring an aggressive shelter in place, social distancing practice just to get our heads wrapped around it. And then certainly the way in which we are going to be forever impacted. And one of the things as we reach this concluding point here, that is, I think, worthy of a consideration in terms of the resources and the way in which we are orienting ourselves is, yes, we've had to do a forced slowdown. Now, Horace ticked through, the ways in which companies have been oriented and forced to become successful in this landscape. And I think that's something worthy of just publishing if you guys haven't yet already. But part of this is, asking ourselves, what have we've lost through not being able to have the hundreds of conversations a day you have in the socially oriented workspace. When we're in the open workspace and we're able to go and collaborate with a colleague and all the innovation that brings. And now we need to be a lot more intentional, which is great. Time is precious, but you also lose that spontaneity. And with that, some of the impacts to innovation. I've talked to entrepreneurs in the tech space, and all of them have said, sure, we've been able to get online and embrace the digital workforce, and it was working well for, maybe the first quarter or two, but now over the long term, this is impeding our success. And so we've also got to think about not just training the workforce and placing people in jobs as we get people back to work. We're wrestling with this long-term unemployment as a country. And this is something that the chairman of the Federal Reserve has long warned against. But we're also reckoning with how we turn the lights back on and get back to work. And I don't think it's going to be as easy as we might think. And so leaning on organizations such as yourselves that have really been able to identify some of these best practices and these opportunities, the 3D printing, I mean, it a great and worthwhile point, because some of that, right, you can do in a social distant format, and that's been to our success. And so we can kind of bite and chew and kind of see how we're all going to get back online, and also the energy costs that get saved too. With maybe less travel and more utilization of Zoom.
Right. I'll just respond to that real quickly. We're actually working with some home-based manufacturers to do some home-based manufacturing off a 3D printer, and they still have to meet the same quality specs as anybody else. So if you're supplying Ford or GM or FCA and you have a quality spec, it has to be met. But if you do that from small businesses, and as you say, socially distanced businesses and even home-based, it provides opportunity, and it takes every federal dollar that we've received, and our goal is to turn it into 3 to 5 corporate dollars. And when you do that, then you're generating money and you feel deserving of the federal funds you receive. That's kind of like
it's almost like you could do a certification too, or cert for being somebody who could do that from your home, and you're using the qualified materials. We've seen this with light guided parts assembly. This was all happening before the pandemic. Hey, what can you assemble from home? How can we make your work life easier? How are we going to, and this goes back to what Dr. Liu mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, the women who are leaving our workforce in droves, and how do we bring the women back? So why don't we do this, Hannah? I know we're running a little over, and I was hoping we'd reclaim some time so we can embrace our intermission. But if you all want to stick with us, we'll do our intermission for about 6-7 minutes here. Stand up, stretch your legs. As we all know, it's healthy to stand up every once in a while. We'll reconvene for the concluding hour of this, but we can pause here on this dialogue and continue. Horace, I don't know exactly your time and Cynthia's, but we're going to continue to keep this conversation going as we get into the last session and then our wrap up discussion. And thank you all so much for being a part of this. This is just a fantastic symposium. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be back at 10:30 or shortly after. Thanks, everyone. Hi, everyone. We're going to start session 3. So first up, we have Amanda Bright McClanahan. She's the Chief Operating Officer for the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. She oversees all operations for the organization, including administrative and programmatic services. She holds a master's in public policy from the Gerald Ford School of Public Policy at the University of Michigan. So Amanda, if you're ready, we have your slides pulled up and you can get started.
Thank you, and good morning. As Hannah said, my name is Amanda Bright McClanahan, and I have the immense privilege of leading the most talented group of economic development professionals in the country at the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. I want to, first of all, sincerely thank you for having me. And to Congresswoman Stevens, it is a privilege to be able to talk about all of the things that we are doing to help Michigan move forward during this time. And I thank you for offering the opportunity. I think I'd like to start with telling you a little bit about what economic development means to the Michigan Economic Development Corporation and how we see our role as we move through the pandemic and into the economic recovery period. We are committed to enabling long-term economic prosperity for Michiganders. We have worked so hard over the last several months, and at every turn, this has been a challenge. The incredible uncertainty and challenges that we faced throughout 2020 has demonstrated a need that even we were unprepared for, as much planning as we try to initiate and work through. Anyone who has watched our organization over the past year would recognize that we are passionate about Michigan. We want to work every day to support businesses and communities throughout our state. And we do that whether we can be there in person or virtually, whether we can get on a plane and travel overseas to encourage investment in our state, or whether we need to make those phone calls directly. We have been working tirelessly, and that's all due to the incredible team that we are very fortunate to have serving the state. The values of our organization and the priority we place on unified success, on thinking radically and acting decisively and delivering solutions has really enabled us to produce a meaningful impact in so many ways, not only in offering relief, but also in implementing long-term recovery efforts that recognize that economic development is not just about business. It's about healthy, vibrant communities. It's about households being able to afford all of the things that they need to be out there and a part of the economy. It's about every region of the state being successful. Our culture of accountability and really focusing that along with our strategic plan on prosperity and opportunity have allowed us to lead a meaningful response to the crisis over the last 9 months. And I want to give you a sense of what we've done up to and including through 9 a.m. this morning when we launched our 21st program in 9 months to help small business. We have worked with state, local, and federal support, of course, our local partners, to provide critical relief to workforce, small businesses, entrepreneurs, communities throughout the state. Really, we could not have done it without the critical federal funding we've been able to receive during this time, and we are very grateful to Congresswoman Stevens and others for helping to support Michigan getting funding through the CARES Act. We remain supportive of efforts at the federal level to continue building on this work, and we stand ready with any additional funding that may be available to implement as quickly as possible to ensure that we can help businesses and communities throughout the state. To date, we have supported more than 18,500 businesses. We've helped to retain almost 147,000 jobs in Michigan. We've launched 20 programs, the 21st is today, and we have helped to supply and ensure production of over 1.2 million individual personal protection equipment pieces throughout the state. We have made sure that our assistance is in every single one of Michigan's 83 counties, and 42% of our support has been dedicated to businesses located in geographically disadvantaged areas throughout the state. And we couldn't have delivered on our mission without the support and partnership of so many across Michigan, including many of those joining us today. Could I have the next slide, please? So today we are presented with a new mission and one that we feel we are ready to take on. We are tasked with setting the course for a positive economic future for Michigan's businesses and our workforce. We will be emphasizing resiliency and equity across the projects and services and programs we support, and we will be focused, laser focused, on the ways forward for all of Michigan to build back better over the next several months. Moving forward, we are poised to leverage all of our tools to address economic challenges in the coming year. Particularly in the next fiscal year, we are ready to roll out an effective incentive toolkit that includes a budget where we have recognized a statewide commitment to rebuilding our economy in a way that carries us so far beyond our status quo to ensure that equity and resiliency that Michigan's going to need to be successful in the 21st century. The 2021 state budget included $100 million for our flagship business development and community development programs, thanks to the leadership of Governor Whitmer. Our approved spending plan has included support through our Michigan Strategic Fund Board for our critical business development and community revitalization programs, as well as our entrepreneurial support system, including smart zones throughout Michigan. We know that Michigan offers an unparalleled combination of a low cost of doing business and a high quality of life. And with the resources that we have at our disposal, we believe that we can absolutely market Michigan as the place to live, work, and play, particularly in our focused industry areas, some of which I'm going to talk about today. I would be remiss if I didn't mention our incredible partnership with Pfizer, who I hope many of you were able to see launching the first vaccines to combat COVID throughout the country. Michigan has been 100% supportive of Pfizer, and we have developed a relationship that has allowed for that innovation and opportunity to support not only our own ecosystem, but now the overall health and well-being of the entire country. Through our Good Jobs for Michigan tool, we were able to provide significant investment into Pfizer and into the larger Kalamazoo community that directly allowed for the types of innovation that you're seeing now, contributing to what we hope to see as the light at the end of the tunnel during this horrible pandemic. We continue to look for new ways to address so many needs as we look to rebuild the economy. I think in a lot of ways, you're going to hear us talk about spaces that we haven't before. And one of those is broadband. We've been getting the question a lot, what is the MEDC doing coordinating the Connected Michigan task force on behalf of Governor Whitmer? It is because we see our role as bringing together this collective stakeholders across the state to address the issues that stand as obstacles to meaningful, equitable economic development across the state. We have used our federal community development block grant funds to connect with the task force and subject matter experts through the Connected Michigan nonprofit in order to develop two frameworks. The first is the infrastructure. How do we ensure that everyone from Ontonagon all the way to Warren has access to cutting edge broadband technology? And then how do we ensure that every household and business can afford it? Broadband is absolutely critical, not only to abilities like small businesses executing on e-commerce, but to enable the levels of connected infrastructure we need for mobility. And it is absolutely a critical support for K-12 education and talent development in the state of Michigan. In terms of our ongoing small business support, we know that businesses and communities throughout Michigan are going to need so much more support than what we can afford to provide. That's why we need to balance our efforts on how we view the current crisis with the long-term outlook for the state, and why we need to depend on all of the partners, including so many on this call today, to help us knit together a strategy that's going to allow Michigan to move forward. We have worked with Michigan Small Business Development Center and the Michigan Manufacturing Technology Center throughout this crisis to not only deploy every level of tool we can, whether it's training on how to manage cash flow in crisis, through setting up your first website to sell your products online, to helping organizations begin to plan for what they need to do to become and stay competitive throughout the next several months. Additionally, I'd like to call attention to two key initiatives that we are working through right now. The first is the Support Local initiative. I encourage you to visit www.michigan.org/supportlocal. We are asking everyone to take an opportunity to buy even just one holiday gift, one meal out from our local businesses. Every single time that you can patronize those businesses, it changes potentially the course for them moving forward, especially as we head into these hard winter months. Additionally, applications went live this morning for the Pure Michigan Small Business Relief Initiative at 9 a.m. I can absolutely tell you that for a $10 million program, by 9:03 this morning, we had 7,000 businesses waiting in line for assistance. The need is so dramatic, and we continue to work to find different ways that we can support, even as we look at limited resources. We are working to do everything we can for those businesses that are unable to access those grants in order to connect them to other local opportunities. So if you have any knowledge that we need to add to our website, we will do that, and we will use our phenomenal call center capabilities to drive home any type of assistance we can provide now and as we continue into the rest of the winter. Finally, I need to talk about tourism. We are thrilled. Pure Michigan is live again. We have gone back on the air effective this month. We have so fortunate to be able to count $15 million in our budget to be able to launch. How do we talk about travel? How do we talk about tourism in Michigan during a time where safety is so important? We have been so grateful to count on businesses throughout Michigan taking the Pure Michigan Pledge. You can find that on www.michigan.org as well, where we're asking businesses to pledge to keep their employees and their customers safe through best practices as they work so hard to stay open throughout this initiative. And the total support and response to that has been just outstanding.
Amanda, I hate to cut you off, but we do have to get on to the next speaker, and
Yep.
we can finish up your slides in the Q&A, if that's
Sure,
okay with
sounds
you.
good. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Next up, we have Wafa Denaro, if she can turn her video on and get queued up. Hi, Wafa.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So Wafa Denaro is the Executive Director of the Economic Development Corporation for Wayne County. Her responsibilities include oversight and execution of Wayne County's economic development initiatives, including the Business Attraction Program, Business Retention and Expansion Program, small business and entrepreneurial support. And Wafa has led the COVID-19 economic response in Wayne County since the beginning of the pandemic, including grants to small businesses and support to workers. Thanks, Wafa.
Great. Yep, thank you so much. Thanks again. And thank you, Congresswoman Stevens, for having me today. Our team at the Wayne County Economic Development has been incredibly busy over the last 9 months. We have been doing everything we can to support small businesses. We understand that small businesses have been the most impacted by the shutdowns and by the pandemic. To date, we have distributed $70 million in grants and loans, $67 million in direct grants, and over $4 million in loans for small businesses. We've rolled out 3 different programs, 3 different grant programs, and one loan program. The loan program was very early in the pandemic. We rolled that out in March, well before there was federal aid, well before the PPP program was rolled out. We understood that small businesses were desperate for cash flow, and we teamed up with TCF Bank to roll out a grant program. We've also have tried everything we can to be innovative, to think outside the box, and use other resources besides financial resources to support businesses. We created a program to move restaurants outdoors when the capacity was limited to 50%. We supported our local cities and townships in changing their zoning so businesses could move into the alleyways, into the parking lots. We even closed some Wayne County roads to be able to expand businesses outside. We've also distributed PPE. We've given small businesses access to a lot of resources on our website. We currently have over 50 plus technical assistance resources and 70 webinars on our website to be able to support and help small businesses. We've also distributed 4,000 PPE kits to small businesses that have requested them and have needed them. And we're continuing to support small businesses by lowering insurance rates, health insurance rates on Health Choice, and continuing to do small business programming. Of the $70 million that we have distributed to small businesses, we've supported over 5,000 businesses. We gave direct $51.1 million in direct aid to small businesses from the CARES money that came from the federal government. We've been incredibly happy with the communication and with how aggressive Congresswoman Stevens has been at advocating for additional funding and support for our county and for our citizens. Through our partnership with the MEDC, we've distributed an additional $7.4 million directly to Wayne County and $7.4 million in the city of Detroit. We've also distributed just under $4.5 million in the loan programs. Of the 5,000 small businesses that we've supported, just over 2,500 are minority owned, just under 2,000 are women owned, 137 are veteran owned, and 100% of these businesses are under 50 employees. So these are the real mom and pop shops that we've been supporting. And we're continuing to hear that they need more support, and we are continuing to provide all the support that we can. With our loan program, we have, like I said, just under $4.5 million. 100% of those businesses were under 100 employees. And as you can see from the map, they were distributed throughout the county. So just to kind of go over some of the numbers, you can see on the map in the bottom right-hand corner, that's kind of the distribution of the grants that we have distributed. The need is all over the county, and we have supported throughout the county. The map, the heat map that's right over it, you can kind of see where the business corridors are, where you see the red. It's right in line with some of those, you know, DDAs and business corridors and some of these business hubs within our county. The Wayne County is the most diverse county in the state of Michigan. And that's not exclusive to just the residents. As far as the businesses goes, our businesses are incredibly diverse. And the money went across the board to a lot of minority owned businesses and a lot of women businesses. And we're incredibly proud to be able to support everybody throughout this pandemic. So currently, we have a couple programs that we're running. We launched last week on Thursday, we launched our Wayne County Cares program, which is a $500 cash card to individuals who work in the industries that are affected by the most recent state shutdown. So for workers in the fitness industry, in the restaurant industry, hospitality, and entertainment, they can apply at www.waynecounty.com/back-to-work. The deadline is today, at the end of the day today, and we will be distributing those funds early next week to be able to get them in the hands of residents who can shop local and support local businesses. With that, we also have a very active advertising campaign to encourage everybody to shop local. We are using the hashtag Shop Wayne County to encourage individuals to shop at their local businesses. We are promoting shopping at local businesses on Google, through Google Ads, on social media, and we think it's incredibly important right now to do at least some of your holiday shopping at local businesses. Local businesses need all the support they can get right now, and we want to be able to support them and make sure that they can survive the pandemic and thrive well after the pandemic. We are going to continue to support small businesses. We are working directly with Congresswoman Stevens, who has been just an incredible advocate throughout this process. And we're hoping that we can continue to get some federal support here in the new year to continue to support some of these small businesses and continue to support individuals as our residents and as the economy struggles. We think federal assistance is more important than ever right now. I'm open to any questions. If there's anything here that you have, any follow-up questions, my email address is there. Feel free to reach out to me at any time.
Thanks so much, Wafa.
Absolutely.
We'll have time for questions after our next speaker. So we'll call up Laura Dodd from Oakland County. If you want to get your video started. Laura Dodd is the Administrator for External Affairs and Business Information for Economic Development in Oakland County. Laura has spent her career in nonprofit leadership, improving lives through public service, creative problem solving, and community service. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Laura has been working to ensure Oakland County small businesses and organizations have access to funding, training, consulting, PPE supplies, and other resources to help weather this crisis. So thanks so much, Laura, for joining us.
Thank you. I'm happy to join you. Is my screen coming through in present mode?
It's not in present mode, but we can see your slides.
All right, let's see if I can get it there. There we go.
Yep, looks good.
All right, so well, thank you for having me. You know, as Oakland County works to respond to the crisis, we appreciate the support and partnership from Representative Stevens, and without this CARES Act funding, we would all be in a much different spot. So we can't just say how much we appreciate the support and her work in Washington, and also the support and work of our partners in Wayne County and at the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, all of whom have really come together to support our economy in Michigan. So Oakland County has received a pretty big chunk in federal CARES Act funding directly, and also have shared in some of the state grant CARES Act funding. So this is our total big pie here. And I'm just going to move along quickly here to show you some of the things we've done with that $238 million allocated. You'll notice the green sections here are all focused on economic development and the support of our economic development and our businesses in Oakland County. We've also spent a pretty decent chunk of the CARES Act funding supporting citizens directly, supporting our schools, cities, villages, and townships, all of those sort of things. But for the purposes of our conversation today, we'll focus more on the support we've been able to offer to our business community. We've had three main large small business grant programs, two of those in partnership with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. The Small Business Stabilization Grant was our very first. And then also with MEDC was the Michigan Small Business Restart Grant. With the stabilization grant, we actually added a bit more money to the pool there to be able to get more money out. Initially, when this all started, we heard $1 million, $2 million, wow, that'll make a big difference. And then just like we talked about with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, we realized how much need was there and how little that $1 million can spread. So we added a bit more money there. So we were able to do about $12 million early in the pandemic to help our small businesses. And then just recently, the close to $12 million in restart funding to small businesses. And then in the middle there, Oakland County did $32 million Oakland Together Small Business Recovery Grant. And that money has all been distributed and is out in the community. We've done a couple of other smaller grant programs, which are just as impactful. One is the $1 million Saving Businesses, Saving Lives grant. And that was a grant that we worked on very early in the pandemic to help provide funding to businesses who were ready to retool and help provide life-saving equipment and tools for our businesses. Some of that PPE that was so challenging to get, that $1 million was designed for that. And then we decided to look at that grant and even go a bit farther. And that's where we have our $10 million PPE resilience grant. And that's a grant in partnership with Automation Alley to help businesses not only retool for this pandemic, but to transition their ability in their manufacturing space to respond to needed challenges, and also to be able to retool and partner as necessary with other businesses around. So for example, when we're talking about respirators, there were many, many different parts that come together to make respirators. And if multiple Oakland County businesses can be responsible to each make their own part and then come together to make respirators all together, we're even better off. So that $10 million PPE resilience grant program with Automation Alley provided 3D printers and also support to help these businesses move on to Industry 4.0, which is a very good long-term goal for them, as well as a short-term need for the pandemic. We put together 15,000 reopened PPE kits. So again, when the PPE was very challenging to get, we were able to buy it in large quantities, split it up, and then make sure it got out there to the businesses in our communities to make sure they had the face masks, the hand sanitizer, thermometers, all of the things that were challenging to get. We worked to make sure that businesses could get those. And we worked with our DDAs and our chambers of commerce to get those grants out there. Oakland County Michigan Works is our other arm of economic development, which really focuses on workforce development. We've worked with Oakland County Michigan Works to make sure our Michigan Works offices are equipped and ready to respond, had the PPE they needed, and also did the building modifications so they're able to work both remotely with folks who are having remote appointments, but also for those folks who needed to come in to have one-on-one meetings. Also some financial counseling, one-on-one financial counseling for any Oakland County worker who wanted to come in and sort of reanalyze and figure out how to make their meet their financial goals now that funds were a bit more challenging. So that's another part of that $1 million Oakland County Michigan Works grant. A few other grants that are not on this chart but have been incredibly important is we've supported our chambers of commerce through this. Many of our chambers were our lifeline of support and were our networks out to our businesses. And so many of those chambers saw their bottom lines just fall out. Folks weren't able to pay their dues and their regular fundraising events couldn't happen. So we also did a big partnership grant with the Chambers of Commerce and also a cities, villages, and township partnership grant, which helped our DDAs. I'm going to move on to the next slide. What we found when we allocated the $238 million was some of our grant programs spent a little more, some of them spent a little less. So we were able to reallocate some funds and also reissue some funds. So very quickly here in December, we realized that the restaurant industry specifically was struggling. So we put together the Oakland Together Restaurant Relief Package. And this is a $10 million package to support restaurants and bars impacted by COVID-19 and specifically some of the health closures. So many of our restaurants already have received funding from us through the 3 small business grant programs that I discussed earlier. They weren't full funding, in a lot of places we were able to, in the state of Michigan, we were able to get businesses a little bit more funding, but because of the density of our small businesses here, we were only able to give partial funding. So what we've done is taken $7 million in CARES Act funding and brought many of those grants up to a level where there's a bit more support. So restaurants in Oakland County that maybe received $5,000, $7,500 now will receive another influx of cash to help stabilize their business. Those restaurants will start hearing from us today. And that money will be directly sent to them, hopefully before Christmas. So that's going out FedEx. We also have $2 million to help adapt outdoor dining facilities. And that is money we have worked on keeping active through March. Even though the CARES Act money needs to be spent now, that money is going to be available a little bit longer. And also another $1 million to assist in safe reopening with the PPE and the things that restaurants really go through quickly to maintain safe facilities. And then there is a lot to talk about, a lot that we offer. Obviously, anybody who needs absolutely anything can reach out to Oakland County. The economic development team can help, or Oakland County Michigan Works. And there's all of our Facebook handles and our email addresses, all of that sort of stuff, as well as that the URL on the bottom down here, oakgov.com/COVID/grants. That is the best place to find our active grants. And we're hoping with additional packages and things passed, hopefully Rep. Stevens, you hear us and you can get some support from your colleagues to re-up some support for our businesses and our communities coming forward. And I know you're working very hard on that. So thanks very much. I'm going to stop my share here.
That's great. Thanks, Laura. And thanks,
welcome.
Papa and Amanda. Just a fascinating session in terms of best practices in action at the state level and at the county level. And one of the things to put into perspective, particularly with that Oakland County budget that was staring us in the face, is that the U.S. Economic Development Administration is appropriated $300 million annually to do their work, to provide catalytic grants at the local level for purposes of economic development. They're one of the few agencies that provides public works support as well as economic development planning grants, as in addition to other innovation type of programs, some of that technology commercialization efforts that we want to see get expanded, as Mr. Dan Berglund was talking about. But $300 million, roughly, just a little under that, for Oakland County just for coronavirus response. And certainly what we're seeing with Oakland County and Wayne County in particular are the true best practices in action. And part of why, in addition to just make sure everyone who's a part of today's symposium has access to these resources and an understanding of them. As Amanda showcased, the Pure Michigan program that was launched today for, up to, I think it was just a little over $10,000 of assistance for small businesses to help with the overhead costs and employment and just keeping the lights on as we make our way through this, was way overprescribed. And one of the things that we look at the federal level when we're spending hard-earned American tax dollars, and particularly to buoy our nation's economy, are these public-private partnerships and the scope of the need. And one thing that's very evident here is that the return on the spend is absolutely working, that there's a real ROI here, that this isn't just businesses that can be dubbed as unsuccessful. It's really through no fault of their own. And what we don't want to do is wake up and see, complete communities that we have to rebuild. You can also look at this conversation through the lens of hardest hit communities before this pandemic even arrived, and what we needed to do for our most distressed communities, which is also really the charge of our Economic Development Administration. But I'm also thrilled as we're reaching the crescendo of our session here today, and certainly it's as your federal representative and one of your federal representatives, let it be known it's heard loud and clear about what we need to do. And part of why we're doing today is to bring this back to Washington and continue to show, in addition to the vaccine and the PPE creation, what's working here on the economic development front, and what we also need to continue to do to get through the other side of this. We also are joined by Tracy Lowe from the Brookings Foundation, who's been in in a research portfolio that has really piqued interest, an interest level of mine, particularly in vacant spaces, environment, or kind of result of, right? So if we've got retail closures, what occurs, and then also just looking at some of the broader economic development opportunities and challenges going forward. So Tracy, I'm not going to steal your thunder. I'd love for you to, maybe shed some light on some reactions from what you've heard from our incredible county and state economic development leaders, as well as maybe some other recommendations that you have for us today.
Sure. And Congresswoman Stevens, thank you so much for inviting me today. This was extremely informative for me, and I really enjoyed hearing from all of the panelists. I have been doing quite a bit of research and writing, particularly about the impacts of the pandemic on the hospitality sector and on both public and private sector responses within hospitality to the crisis, and how things are evolving. And so it was particularly interesting to hear from Amanda and from Wafa and from Laura about hospitality focus and tourism focused relief that they've been working on, because I do think that is going to be a key in terms of driving, both getting through the pandemic, but as we pivot to recovery and wanting to talk about an equitable recovery, what happens in that sector is really going to make a difference for whether we're talking about a recovery that takes 1 year versus 10 years, or looking at the possibility of never recovering and of adjusting to a new normal. So I have some questions. Rather than just talking about my own research, I would love to hear a bit more from the panelists if they don't mind taking questions. I'm particularly interested in hearing in terms of looking at the constellations of programs that that both the state and the county levels have created in an attempt to respond to the pandemic. I already felt like it sounded like I was getting some hints from Laura about how like some programs felt more successful and impactful than others. There's been time to rebalance between programs. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you're hearing on the ground and how you're measuring success and impact. And then what are the programs that are most successful? And as we think toward, what our needs and expectations are for future federal relief, I heard loud and clear that there's a need for more federal relief, but can we be a little bit more specific about what is most needed right now at the point where we are in the winter of the pandemic, on the precipice of the vaccine, and starting to want to think about recovery?
Anyone can take that. Amanda, Laura, Wilfa.
I guess I'll start. So I think, when we were looking at the overall recovery and the overall response to COVID-19, we tiered it. I mean, initially it was, how can we support the direct health response? So we invested in testing. First and foremost, we invested in PPE. And then we started looking at the economic impacts. That was kind of secondary to the immediate health response. When looking at the economic response, we were hearing that it was small businesses. Small businesses were the ones that were being shut down. Small businesses were the ones that don't have the cash capital on hand to be able to sustain, to be able to pay their rent, and to be able to sustain themselves long term. So we were looking at, how do we support these small businesses, and how do we support these small businesses that don't have the resources to apply for the PPE or get boxed out of some of these federal programs. So we tried to make it as easy as possible for them to apply and still be in compliance and still pass auditing and things like that. So that was kind of our thought process. We made the granting process as simple as we could, while still, making sure that we would pass federal audits and be able to explain. The way we're measuring success, it's actually been incredibly difficult to measure success, because with small businesses, there's no way of tracking if they shut down or if they, permanently close their doors. So we're trying to partner with some of the gas and gas companies to see if they shut their gas off. It's a little difficult to get data otherwise, because when small businesses close their doors, there's no reporting mechanism. They just shut their doors and maybe stop paying for their website. So that's been really one of our biggest challenges to measure, to get any metrics. But we're also doing surveys. We're sending out emails on a regular basis. We're sending out surveys to ask, what are your needs? How has this money helped you? What do you need moving forward? And what we keep hearing is we need more support. Our employees need additional funding, especially right now with the current shutdown. What we were hearing was employees need more support. They're either on unemployment or they're just underemployed. Wait staff, bartenders are just not getting the hours that they would normally get. And I mean, this is kind of anecdotal, but I had a Starbucks employee send us an email and say, look, I'm in this college program, but it was like 530 hours a year to be able to get Starbucks to pay for my tuition. And I can't meet those hours because our hours keep getting cut back. So those are some of the anecdotal stories that are going to have huge economic impact that aren't measured. You can't measure that this student isn't going to be able to complete the next semester because they're not getting their hours in. So we are trying to figure out ways to fund some of these people individually. You know, we're giving $500 gift cards to them individually, but that is not enough. That's going to be enough to spur some spending locally over the next couple of weeks, but it's not nearly enough support to maintain if the shutdowns continue and if we don't get the vaccine, if we don't get the vaccine mass distributed within the next couple of months. We need more federal support.
Heard loud and clear. And I don't know if it's helpful to you, but, you know, I think the data do support the general conclusion that December is an extremely critical month for hospitality and tourism businesses and workers. And that's just something that we know, you know, from before the pandemic, that December is a peak month for income in both retail and hospitality, and just as we know that January is one of the slowest months, but that does mean that, like, right now is an incredibly critical time for these workers, and I think the data are totally consistent with the stories that you're hearing.
I would say I can add a little bit. From the state level, I think we took a little bit different approach. While we tried to look at how do we really view program rollout through the phase of relief recovery, I think we approached it from a perspective of how do we deploy every tool that we have as effectively as possible. So I might actually use Pure Michigan as an example of that, because I think a lot of times it is misconstrued as a marketing campaign. I want to be 100% clear. It is an economic development tool. So I want, you know, I try to really correct that. So whether it's taking place on national TV or not, it is an economic development tool. So what we tried to do is to say, through our different networks, how is it that we use the power of the brand? And we use that to drive, first of all, awareness around public health needs. We use it to say to Michiganders who were making decisions during the summer, once the initial emergency orders were cycling through and there were some restrictions being lifted, how are you traveling safely? And how do we then take a look at using the brand to help restaurant owners in particular and workers? So if anybody hasn't been to the Mitten State recently, there's t-shirts for sale, 2 peninsulas, 1 Michigan. That is a fundraiser where we were again trying to use the brand. I think it's easy to underestimate the power of those types of initiatives, because right now in Michigan, it's about encouraging the spending. It's about encouraging that resilience, but it's also about reminding everybody that we're in this together. And maybe that's an interesting thing for an economic developer to be saying, but that connection and that collective ownership of this problem is part of the solution. Without that, you continue to maybe, and no judgment, it's Christmas, you click on Amazon instead of, in my neck of the woods, Schuler's Books. And so it's not, again, it's an idea of how do we make that connection to identity. How you measure that effectiveness is something that we're pretty adept at because we have the marketing toolbox behind us. But I think the long run impacts of that allow us to then make the case for economic development prioritization moving forward. The one thing I would also put out there right now is there's going to be a want to pull back on economic development funding. We're going to want to pull back on those proactive efforts to move Industry 4.0 forward or to look at tech talent expansion. The idea is going to be, you know, maybe don't incent that downtown new development. Economic development is long ball. We can't do either or, we have to do them both. And so that's something that we're going to need leadership on at all levels, is to call on the fact that we can't stop the momentum of moving forward on economic development, even while we're trying to provide relief. And I think that's a lot of what you're going to be seeing from the MEDC is wrestling with what feels like a little cognitive dissonance. It's not, it's sound strategy. So those are my 2 cents, Tracy, just to add some broader context.
Wow, Michigan is so lucky to have your leadership, Amanda. That was.
Thanks.
Well, thank you all for sharing that. We have a couple other questions that we want to try to get to before we wrap up here. We have Alyssa Sullivan from MXD. I think she had a question or some comments that she wanted to make. We'll ask her to unmute, see if we can get her on.
Good morning, can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. So thank you so much for allowing a few minutes here. And my name is Alyssa Sullivan. I'm the Director of External Relations at MXD, which stands for Manufacturing Times Digital. And this view behind me is something that the Congresswoman is very familiar with as a distinguished alum of our organization. So we're just very grateful to have her leadership in DC and a strong understanding of our mission as she moves forward with policymaking. We, like others on the call, are grateful and energized recipients of CARES Act funding through the Department of Defense to help shore up manufacturers for the challenges of COVID-19 and beyond. And I want to just note that although I am here in Chicago, this is a national mission. So we are a national institute, and I even see my colleague Joe Steele from LIFT on the phone here. So as a network of 15 institutes, we are charged with moving the manufacturing sector forward in the United States. And so I wanted to offer a couple of resources. Industry 4.0 has rightly come up a number of times as, looking toward the future, what we can do in order to prepare ourselves to supercharge economic development. And we, like others, have been assembling as many resources as possible. So I would encourage any manufacturers who are interested to visit our website, which is mxdusa.org. We have a webinar library. So we've been doing dozens of webinars since the start of the pandemic, providing resources to small, medium, large manufacturers that are looking to start their digital journey or supercharge it. We have a hiring guide for cybersecurity in manufacturing as more folks get connected, work remotely, and connect with their other locations across the country. And we also have, if you wanted to really just get started with a couple of bite-sized pieces, we have an advice column. So if you want to ask questions like, what safety mask should I be wearing in the factory? Or can COVID go through the vents in my workplace? Or, all sorts of really accessible questions that manufacturers are having these days. Ask Deb. We have Deb from QA to answer your questions. So all of these resources are available on our website. I wanted to just take a moment and share them with you. I hope that they're helpful. And thank you so much for bringing this phenomenal group of people together this morning.
Thanks so much, Alyssa. Okay, we have a couple more questions. We'll try to get through them quickly. We have one from Shashwat Sitek. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. So he was saying that he can see that there's a balance between short-term consumption and long-term investment to be made as we respond to the pandemic. How successful have businesses been in particular in finding that balance?
Well, I'm happy to maybe jump in a little bit here as it relates to Oakland County. We keep talking about there was stabilization, recovery, relief and recovery. And I don't know that we're even at the stage yet where businesses are able to identify that they feel like they're in a recovery phase. So many of our businesses still feel like they're in the stabilization phase and they're struggling with long range. And I think particularly that question is why we've developed some of these programs like the PPE Resilience Grant that says, okay, this is a stabilization for now, but putting in some long-term strategies for recovery, even if that's not necessarily what the businesses are looking for right now. I mean, a lot of them are looking to make payroll, to be honest with you. They're looking to figure out how to keep the lights on, how to pay their rent or mortgage, and how to pay their employees. And I feel like that long range look, even though we all are charged with doing that as economic development professionals, and I think some of the larger corporations really are doing a great job keeping their eye on that ball. So many of our small businesses just aren't there. They'll get there, we'll help them get there, but they're just not there right yet.
I think I would add, I think some of our small and medium manufacturers in certain sectors, particularly around advanced manufacturing, are starting to make the turn. It's part of the reason the Michigan Strategic Fund approved Industry 4.0 large scale initiative last week, I think, is to start those discussions. I don't think we want to underestimate for a lot of these businesses as they're working through really difficult decision-making processes around payroll, around rent, around really just making sure their employees are taken care of. That they're also engaged in these planning processes where we may need to be engaged at a different level than we have in the past. It may be that we need to support the technical assistance in planning and think about a different way to use our incentive tools. That's something we're doing, and owning effect a little bit that maybe some of our traditional cash incentives, for example, don't support the planning phase in the right way. And I'm using that really broadly because, of course, industries have a lot of variation. But I think that's particularly true as well for community development. So all these local communities have been engaged, right? Construction has continued when it could, and then it's been paused and opened up again. These projects are continuing. And so how do we support that? And I think there's a recognition that we need to be there whenever these folks are ready to go through that transition. I would agree with Laura on that. It's not about our timetable. It's about theirs.
Great. Well, our time is almost up. We'll try to get one more question in. We'll ask this one from Shashwat again. He had a second question. How have you seen businesses, and particularly restaurants, adapt their facilities to transition to digital operations? And have you seen businesses struggle with pivoting that to create their website or, do carry out and stuff like that? How have you seen businesses handle that?
I guess I can take that. We actually were very proactive in connecting businesses with programming students who could develop the websites for relatively low cost. It was kind of difficult. It was difficult for businesses initially to be able to find the resources to get online, to be able to pivot. But we were very proactive in connecting restaurants with DoorDash, Grubhub, Uber Eats very early in the process so they could transition. And then we connected them with students who could build their websites and build their online presence. It's still a struggle. It's still an ongoing process. It's difficult for businesses, especially some of these older businesses who have been doing things for 20 years a certain way, to transition and to be able to track their inventory online. We're still trying to figure out the best practice for that. And we're still trying to figure out how to provide technical assistance for those businesses. So it's very much, it's a moving target at this point.
Anyone else want to?
Yeah, I'll just say as it relates to restaurants, I think the innovation that they've come up with things we never would have dreamed of. And some of them even now are redefining Michigan outdoor dining. Anybody who's been to Minnesota knows, there's no bad weather, just bad clothes. And I feel like in Michigan, our businesses, our restaurants are saying, hey, visit the outdoor store down the street, bring a sleeping bag, and we're going to do everything we can to keep you dining outside as long as you want. So I think a lot of them have been more innovative than we ever would have imagined. And I think they've really partnered, especially I've been so impressed with our DDAs and how they have come together and supported our cities, villages, and townships are making sure they have the support they need. Instead of putting it on one restaurant to create an outdoor dining pavilion. They're saying, we're going to close Main Street and the whole thing is an outdoor dining pavilion. So it's really been a beautiful mix of innovation, creativity, thoughtfulness, and partnership. And coming online has definitely been a big part of it. The other thing we've seen is so many of these businesses have had to adapt their menus. Things that are delicious in the restaurant really stink when you take them home. So a lot of our restaurants have thought about what is actually good to go home. Restaurants who were known for their French fries before don't serve them now because they're not good coming home. So really it's been working to give them a venue for sharing best practices. And that's the thing we've been working on, is let them innovate and then give them an opportunity to talk about that.
Great. Thank you all so much. We really appreciate it. Very insightful. And I'll pass it over to the Congresswoman for her closing thoughts.
Yeah, well, no, thank you. And the springboard to action, obviously through what has been articulated so clearly. And I really got to hand it to Amanda, because she and her, I should have jumped in when she said it, but she said, we can't forget that we still need to do the economic development work that we were doing before all of this happened, that we need to do both. And that's going to get us to do more. And in particular, in this closing panel, one of the things that I'm getting from this is that we have not only an incredible amount of just activity in terms of the allocation of economic development resources, almost a truly unprecedented action. We also have individuals who are just charged with cutting through the red tape. So thinking through in terms of what is the long term and our broader economic development considerations. I see my friend Mike Coast has been with us almost the entirety and has his hand raised. And Mike Coast is the managing director of the Michigan Manufacturing Technology Center, one of our MEP centers, who in partnership with an MXD has also been doing the work. Whether it's in partnership or just exclusively, but has been doing the work to provide the technical assistance and to get our manufacturers through to the other side. So important, but also to what Wafa shared with the Starbucks student and the 500 plus credit hours that they need to get. And how do we help that individual? And when you look at why the dollar figures at the federal level in a country of our size are so large, it's because we require that flexibility, that we place our trust in our municipal leaders, certainly accountable to the public trust and elected office and the appointment system from there, and the jobs that people get hired in for to do the work that Amanda, Laura, and Wafa are doing, and where we need to continue to go from here. And so what we would like to offer to all of you is the continuation of the dialogue. I think another thing that was just incredibly significant is to have us all assembled here this morning. I was getting ready for today and I was thinking, yeah, this is a nice 2.5 hour symposium. And normally, yes, we'd be used to being in person, but we want to maintain and continue the dialogue as we achieve the next round of coronavirus relief funding, but also where we go from here. And so I plan to, particularly within the committees that I'm serving on and continuing to serve on in the United States Congress, the Education and Labor Committee, certainly another circling topic that we just briefly touched on with regard to human capital, right? And the needs of a trained and talented workforce, something that all of you are touching in your respective spaces, not just our panelists, but I'm just looking at our list of attendees here, the need for talent and the impacts on that. I know our chambers are continuing to play such an important role in that, and also the global race for talent as well, because that leads to innovation and broader economic recovery, something we know so well here in Michigan with our rich culture of foreign direct investment. I'm looking at you, Oakland County. I know you guys did a lot of great work on that over the last, decade and a half in particular, coming out of the last big recession. And I think that's another testament, is that Michigan has been knocked down before, and we just always know how to get back up. We know what to do. We are certainly writing part of this playbook as we go, but we do know what to do. And we've got a responsibility at the federal level to make sure that our agencies are serving our interests, from the Small Business Administration to the U.S. Treasury Department to even our Veterans Affairs Department, that we need good functional government and the appropriated resources to come from our federal government in a responsible, efficient way to exercise the best of our community. And so with that, Hannah, I know we wanted to kind of show our contact information and a way in which you all can continue to keep in touch with us. I'm going to continue to have my town halls and exchanges, but this group here today is really part of, I want you all to consider yourself part of the brain trust, right? Of where we want to go as a district and how we want to utilize the point of leverage from where I sit is as a member of Congress, and with all the work that you're doing to really forge a true partnership. That, again, as a reminder, that other committee I sit on is that Science, Space, and Technology Committee, for particularly with an emphasis on research and development. And I plan to use that platform too to share what you all are doing. So panelists, be on alert, because we're going to ask for some letters for the record too, because I want this to go in the official record. But some of you have maybe met our Michigan Chief of Staff District Director, Colleen Pober, someone with a tremendous economic development background herself, and certainly is from a couple turns ago, on the Liquor Commission, very familiar with cutting through some of that red tape that we've had to see with expanding outdoor dining and witnessing the success of our businesses. I also found it so interesting with Tracy Lowe, with the emphasis on tourism, entertainment, travel, and what's also happening with our hotel industry, the impact to state and local dollars, and some of the jobs that, it's like we want to keep going, but let's be real here, is that we have, countless Americans who've been left out of work, who have been looking for jobs. I had that exact number here, who've been looking for jobs and haven't been able to find new employment. And, there's obviously the individual narratives, there's the 2,000 businesses here in Michigan, the 2,000 restaurants in Michigan that have already closed, the 59,000 manufacturing jobs that have been lost, despite, some of the increase in activity. And, the countless Americans, it's really in the, hundreds of thousands who, are still swinging into that next job or waiting for their profession to come back. Obviously, all of you have had the chance to see Hannah Gianni in action today, and we're so thrilled to very intentionally have someone who's in charge of economic development on behalf of our office, working in partnership with our businesses directly, learning about what they do and what they need, working with our stakeholders and our partners, our subject matter experts, did such a great job of convening today and works here in our Michigan office. And then Casey Denoy, who works in who's a Michigander by birth, and is now working in our DC office on these exact policy matters and helping us to craft this legislation. So that's the other thing that we need to continue to think about here and develop and get done, is the funding and also the support for the programs. So this line remains open to develop those policies, develop that legislation, support the federal agencies, as well as all of your efforts going forward. So thank you so much for today. We will be packaging some of what we've heard and the summaries and of course the next steps as we move forward and close out 2020 and head into 2021. Thank you all so much.